Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Spotlight. We have our returning guest, famous podcast alumni, Justin Nock.
Hey. I'm back.
Yeah, he's back finally. I had you on last time because you were the president of the Students for Open Discussion, but
Yes.
we're still going to talk about that. But I guess the thing I've been having people introduce themselves as is, what are some of the important things that people should know about you if you were to introduce yourself?
Oh boy. So I'm an engineering student, so I spend a lot of time working on that. Just lots of homework.
It's a full-time job, yeah.
It's pretty great. I make music in my free time, so that's a good time. I'm doing a music tech minor here, so I'm in my last class for that. Let's see, what else? We've got baking. I've gotten into baking in the past few years, so that's something I really enjoy.
Yeah, I saw that on your questionnaire. You enjoy making specifically breads, and then
Yeah, usually once a week I'll make my own bread and just keep that going.
so that's such a wholesome hobby. I don't think there are a lot of things more wholesome than like just like making food and just like enjoying it. Do you put on like the mittens and everything? Like,
Oh, no. No, I just have a bread machine.
oh, okay.
A year ago I was like, I want better bread. And so
Dang, that is the most engineer response ever. Is I want better bread. So you learn how to bake to make better bread.
I mean, all I got to do is put the ingredients in and hit the go button. And
And then it makes good bread.
It does the rest. Yeah.
I'll have to try some of your homemade bread, but I don't know. The baking's always fun. But what we didn't get to talk about last time, and what I wanted to ask you about was the music making, because you have that.
Yeah.
What is it? Sound engineering, or what's the minor that you have?
The minor's music technology.
Music technology, and I didn't even know they offered that one.
Yeah.
And so you did homework at a place that does music. You were working at a music lab or music equipment, like watching over the equipment. I guess walk me through your music experience and then like how this started, what you do, and where that goes.
Sure. So I started my musical career in 5th grade. Started with the saxophone. Enjoyed that. Went throughout high school. In the middle school and high school, I played bari sax
Nice.
sometimes. So that's the big one. I enjoyed that. So I was in marching band, concert band, jazz band. All those were fun. I'd say concert band was probably my favorite.
Let's go.
I've been delving into jazz a little more. It's just very complicated.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. My philosophy on jazz has always been it's an excuse to play wrong notes, but
sort of. There's so much theory. I was learning about the Lydian chromatic concept a few weeks ago, and it was like
blowing your mind.
it's crazy. It's really cool, but it's just so dense.
The jazz is just one of those things where it kind of takes the art of music and then says like, you don't get it. Like if you don't like it, you don't get it. And that's the response that I've gotten when I say that I'm not a huge fan of jazz, because a lot of it like rhythmically is complex and then chromatically is complex, but I think it goes overboard in which like it's so complex it's not good to listen to, it's just impressive. And so like you kind of lose a lot of like the value of the music because of how intricate it can be.
I agree to some extent. A good example is John Coltrane's Giant Steps.
I know John Coltrane, but I don't know that one.
Giant Steps is a song that essentially switches between 3 keys repeatedly in the chord progression. It's insane. It's an insane, inspirational piece of jazz work. Really well done. Is it my favorite to listen to? No.
Yeah, but
it's super impressive. I mean, he spent like, I think over a year trying to figure out how to improvise over these very complex chord structures and
it's stuff like that like I appreciate it in the musical sense.
Yeah.
But I'm not a huge like I can't defend it.
Theory heavy. And there's been some pushback from people saying that the theory isn't everything and need to take a step back from it sometimes.
Yeah, and I think I'm on that train. It's important to know theory and to understand theory. at least if you're gonna make music, and if you enjoy music, it kind of adds another element of enjoying or not enjoying some music. But in general, I think taking a step away from it can help sometimes, especially when making music. If you're trying to like start, because you make music, which I kind of want to hear the rest of your story. When did you start making music, and how did it
Yes,
progress from
yes.
band to Eclectic Sauce?
So I started my senior year of high school. I did music technology or digital music class, and that was a good time. We were in FL Studio and just making simple little songs, and I learned the fundamentals. So I decided to buy that after I graduated high school. And from there, I made my first song that summer, which is Anyone Can Cook.
Yep, banger.
Yeah, the mixing on that one wasn't great. I lost the original file, so I had to fix it in some not ideal ways. But
That's one of two songs that I have on my Spotify. I have Anyone Can Cook, and it has cat in the title. It's
Cat's Cradle.
Cat's Cradle. Yeah, I have those two because I actually also make music. By the way,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I make video game style music, which is similar to what your music reminds me of, like Binding of Isaac or like
Okay.
Super Meat Boy. This kind of like off kilter, but like kind of darker sounding music. Although it's not dark, it just has like an unsettling feeling to it.
Uh-huh.
Like your album cover suggests, it's kind of a mix of, of a lot of different things. But
Yeah, that album is all over the place. And I'm glad I did it that way. I got to explore a lot of different genres and just try out different techniques and pairings of genres, even things that don't usually go together.
So like when you're making this music, what's the creative process of doing this? Like, I guess walk me through how you created some of these songs, because I don't talk to enough people who make music.
Sure. Anyone Can Cook started with the drums, I believe. I just made a solid drum 808 beat, pretty standard. And then I can't remember if chords or melody were next. I want to say it was chords and then melody, which is a very, very structured way to create music. Yeah, so it was very like rigid, that song.
Did you go in there with like an idea of this is the kind of song I want to make, and then you started making it, or did you just like pull out like the studio and just start crafting stuff?
I was going for a funkier sound, I think, and then it's still kind of funky, but not to the extent I was expecting. And the orchestra really takes it in a different area. Those synth strings you hear. And that often happens with me. I never quite know what feel I'm going to end up with. And sometimes I have to redirect because of that.
I guess some would say that that's like the fun part of making music and having an album that's so diverse like that. Is like this like describes me developing music. And so are you working on music still? What's your music journey looking like now?
Yeah, each song kind of starts a different way. Some of them I'll start with the melody, like Molten Molasses. I started writing the melody first before anything else. Sometimes it's the chords. Usually when I start with chords, it's a more theory-based song, like theory heavy. I have one song that I've been working on that's a quartet. It's a saxophone quartet I wrote in high school, but I've adapted it for synthesizer. And that one is just so much theory. It's essentially a classical piece, or maybe Baroque.
That's super cool that like, because when I'm making music, it's so like I know what sounds good, like theoretically, you know what I mean? Like I'm not doing it randomly. Like I'm singing the sound in my head of what I want and then finding it. But it's all just a keyboard. Like I'm playing it on the piano, you know what I mean? And then like changing different sounds and whatnot. But all of the music, it doesn't come from like a set theory. It's just like, this is what the chord progression should sound like in general. Like it should go higher to this degree than lower to this degree. Like
Uh-huh.
it's like very not researched, but I understand what I like in music. And so it's very not researched. So it's really exciting to hear like, okay, this is based off of like researched theory. This is going to be objectively correct. Whether or not it's good is different, but it's going to be theoretically
objectively correct is
a little off kilter, maybe.
it's I mean, it's objectively correct to the style. But,
Yes.
you bend the rules, you break the rules.
Mhm.
Like Anyone Can Cook has the natural and the sharp 7 in it. So it has this like leading up to the root note, which is an interesting effect.
I would say I'm trying to think. The playlist that I have your songs on is like a 23-hour long playlist. So it's got a lot of.
Doesn't get a lot of playtime then.
I hear it more often than you'd think. And when I hear it, I think of you very instinctively. So it's got an emotional attachment to it. But I'm mixing it up with some other music, I think, in my head when I'm trying to play it. The songs in my head. But when do you think you're gonna be releasing music again? The fans want to know.
Oh, for the past 3 semesters, it's been like next semester. Oh yeah, it'll be next semester. So
How much do you have cooking right now?
I've got 5 or 6 songs pretty much done.
Okay.
So I'm getting close to the next album. I'm being more picky. Also, less time in general, less productivity.
What would you say your inspirations are when you're making music? Like, what kind of music do you listen to?
I listen to a ton of funk music, jazz funk or like 70s, more pop funk. Yeah, bands like The Meters. Meters are really solid. Parliament, Funkadelic. Those are some classics. And then modern day, you got like Wolfpack. And they have a whole universe.
I'll say I've heard of
surrounding
Wolfpack, but I don't think I recognize any of those, which is unfortunate. But for the people that do, like,
Yeah, Wolfpack is one of the most popular modern funk bands.
would you say that those bands are in the style of what you do, like generally, or
No.
no? Hey, that's good. That's good.
No, not quite.
If you were to look for someone, if an audience were listening and they wanted to understand what kind of music you make, what would you say? Like, what would you say you do? What does it take inspiration from, or what has it taken inspiration from?
Yeah,
That's an easier
kinda
question.
tricky. Each song is different. Like I do have a funk song on the first album, Steely Jungle, and that one's structure is based off Chameleon by Herbie Hancock, which is a jazz fusion song from the 70s. And that one has like a very, very repetitive bass line that's like, I don't know, the song's like 16 minutes or something, maybe 18.
Wow.
It's a long song. But there's this one part where it's broken up, and I have a similar sort of setup in my song where it's got this groove that's building, and then it transitions into this this different, more low-key sort of bass line and stuff to accompany that, and then it transitions back into the first original bass line.
So, like, if you were to say what influences or what inspires your album, you'd have like a song for every song. Like, it's
Sort of. Not all of them, but some of them, like Cat's Cradle, for example. That's based on Love Fool by the Cardigans. I was sort of trying to get that sound. I noticed they included a chord with a 9th in it, so I put one of those in my chord progression to get a similar feel. So yeah, I grab little bits and pieces from music I like.
So when you're doing research to do this kind of stuff, do you have perfect pitch, or do you just, yeah, okay. or do you just like look at the tabs, or do you understand music theory enough to like know where the music's going?
I don't really do tabs. I read chords, read chord progressions. My ear isn't that good. I haven't trained myself super well, so I fall back on like reading music a lot and writing and theory, that sort of stuff.
And that's probably where the band comes in to help.
Yeah, and from there, I make the judgment call with my ear. Do I like this or do I not like this?
Okay.
And, sometimes it's by the book pretty good, but, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Yeah, and that's just how it is. You don't want to be too restricted by what the music's saying. But yeah, everyone go check out Justin's album.
Yeah, the next one is in progress. Electric Sauce.
Yeah, the sequel, Eclectic Sauce.
So that one is
Electric
just
Sauce.
electronic music, which I've been getting more into lately.
That's exciting. I'm definitely excited. I'm always looking for more music to add to that playlist. So more like music without lyrics, just kind of like vibey, study video game type. I'd consider it a video game type music just because it doesn't have lyrics, but
Sure.
I wouldn't.
I get a lot of people saying like, "Oh, I listen to this while I do homework."
Yeah, that's
the most common thing I hear.
Yeah, that's me for sure.
And I appreciate it.
It says-
Also, like 3 years ago when I released my first album, it was really cool to hear everyone's favorite song. Because eventually I got somebody saying that each one of the songs was their favorite.
Which is the best. That's how you know you did something good.
That felt really good.
Yeah.
Because I made music that someone, that was
someone's
for
favorite.
them.
Yeah.
And
that's
I
always
struck
good.
a lot of different chords with
Yeah,
the variety.
Especially if your album's kind of all over the place too, like that. Like you're hitting everybody, like at least one person.
Mhm.
That's a success. Like when me and my buddy did mine, it was bizarre because we had like 4 people say a specific song was their favorite, and it was like our most under the radar, like shoe-in song. Like it was pretty good, but we just didn't expect people to like it, and now it's like the most liked one, which is just bizarre because it's very mid.
Everyone's sort of like that.
Where you kind of don't understand where the, like, I mean,
Well, I do, but yeah, I don't know. It's
yeah.
not the best produced song. I made that one in high school, so
Hey, I mean, which is saying something about, I guess, your talent or skills or something. If
possibly.
an older version of you made a song that everyone,
I mean, the
most people
competition
like,
is
so.
nice. It's a short song. Though.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's good. I wanted to get an update on what you're doing with students for open discussion.
Yeah.
So you had pretty much all of last semester to kind of like build it up since we last talked. So I guess walk me through how that's been going.
It's been good. We've been pretty successful at Club Fest this year. And we got some people last semester as well that have become regulars. So we're accruing a pretty good-sized group. This semester, it's been about 10 people showing up on average for our discussion. It's been a nice size. If we get over 12, I think we'll have to split. And
Do smaller groups.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I would take one group, and Elise, our vice president, would do the others. So yeah, I feel like we're going to hit that this semester.
And you guys are still going on Thursdays?
No, we're on Fridays now.
Okay. What time?
Friday, 5 to 6 in Marston.
Okay.
Marston 2200.
If it was the same time on Thursday, I'd be able to go, but Friday is actually kind of scary.
No.
Because I just want to be in there and absorb the environment. And like, can you,
Yeah.
I guess, walk me through what you guys do? What's it like being in that room? Because I've been
Sure.
listening to a lot of like discussions and like debates, and they tend to get so heated, but some of them are so under control. So like, walk me through what it feels like to be in the room while you're doing this.
Yeah, so we're a very relaxed environment, very casual. Basically, we come in and we chat for a few minutes, catch up, say hi, and then we begin with opening remarks about the topic, which was voted on the previous week. And so everyone goes around, says their opinions if they want to about what they're feeling about the topic in general. And then we have 3 discussion questions that we will go over and use for inspiration. And then everyone can pass the ball around, and if they have the ball, they can talk. So, yeah, we just kind of go around, and whoever wants to talk can, and you can sit there the whole time and say nothing. It's up to you, really.
That the ball probably helps a ton. Are people pretty like receptive to that and like not interrupting? Yeah. Okay, like, there's not issues of people getting.
Yeah, every once in a while, if you want to like interject something just to clarify that,
Like you can say something.
yeah, I mean, within reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
But usually it's very civil and organized. Every once in a while, we'll get like 4 people raising their hand at once, and
Yeah.
that's a little hard to navigate. But
So are you generally the moderator of these conversations?
yeah, I'm the moderator by default, and then if I'm not there, then Elise is.
And so I guess that's such an interesting role to be in. What are some of your like rules, or what are you thinking about when you're moderating? Like what are you trying to accomplish?
Um, yeah, it's tricky because I'm also still in the discussion, so sometimes I have to take myself back a little and realize, like, okay, I gotta do my job here as well.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, the main thing I look for is respect, and generally we don't have issues with that. People respecting each other and their opinions. If people are generalizing about certain groups of people, that's sort of like a red flag for me, where I might start asking what they mean by something, potentially. But generally, we don't really have those issues. Yeah, no like known offensive terms or stuff like that. But generally, that's not an issue either.
This seems like a pretty difficult job to have, especially if you have
It is.
stakes in the conversation.
Yeah.
Like just having to hold.
There's a
hold
few
yourself
issues that have been a little more difficult in the past to maintain a fair balance on, with free speech, as well as, protecting the people who need to be protected.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any examples of?
Mostly transgender people. Yeah, it's just some people do not believe in transgender people. They don't believe people can be transgender. And that's been a point of debate, I guess, in the past.
Yeah.
Not debate, but
That could
disagreement.
be a pretty contentious.
Yeah. And it's very important that trans people are respected in our space. So I have to navigate that carefully.
Yeah, because it would be hard for me to imagine that like a person who's saying that their end goal point is to say that like you don't exist. You know what I mean? I think like the end goal point is saying you're incorrect. But at the same time, it's like, how do you navigate and say those words? Like, especially when there are other animosities that a person could have as well, like that they aren't talking about. And then how do you navigate that conversation while like adding respect to both positions, but also like making sure no one's getting like offended or hurt or anything.
Right. It's a very, very thin tightrope
Yeah.
to walk.
Have you made mistakes in that and learned from them, or is this just something that like?
Yeah, there was one discussion. I myself got a little heated. I will admit. And, I'm very pro-trans. So that kind of bled into the conversation. And I think I might have misinterpreted something. But
well, we brought that footage up here. No, that'd be so funny.
No footage. But yeah, us officers, we talked and we worked it out and reached some good conclusions about moderation and
like what to do when something like that happens.
Yeah.
And, yeah, because I feel like that's been the most difficulty in discussing these. A lot of people when they're researching, I guess politics in general or anything that would be involved in an open discussion conversation, a lot of the stuff they find are like much angrier people than they are. And so I feel like when they're having the conversations, all their standpoints come from angry people. And it's not necessarily that they're angry people, but like I don't think they realize the things that they're bringing up are kind of angry points, even though they're not angry about it. And so I feel like that's something that I'm discovering when talking to people, or I guess listening to people talk about it, to where it's like, I don't think these people are angry about this, but they've only heard angry people talking about this. So I think that's just how they talk about it. And I don't think that's a super good conversation starter.
Yeah, I think that can definitely happen.
Yeah.
Contributes towards like radicalization
Yeah.
in some cases.
Which we talked about a lot last time, which is an awesome conversation to have with the president of the Open Discussion, the Open Discussion Club, which is awesome, by the way, which I think is
Yeah, our goal is not to like change anyone's mind or radicalize them to one thing or another. So that's another thing we have to be careful about is me or one of the officers pushing our own agenda into the club. That's explicitly prohibited in our Constitution.
Would you say that, like, if I were to ask somebody about the Open Discussion Club, do you think you've been successful at doing that? If I ask somebody, do you think Justin has like ulterior motives when he does this? Do you think they'd have something to say about it?
I think most people would think I've been doing a good job. There's a few little mistakes I've made, but in general, I keep it pretty neutral. I can't think of any other examples of like the discussion questions are a big thing and the sources. We now have both me and the vice president looking those over every week, which has been good. We can kind of make sure we've got a more complete picture and people can read ahead of time the sources and gather a broader background knowledge.
What have been some of the topics that you guys have had recently or just in the past semester?
Yeah, so this semester we've had the body positivity movement and the positive and negative effects about that. And also we talked about body neutrality.
Body neutrality, what is? I don't think I've heard that before.
Body neutrality is appreciating your body for what it's able to do and how it functions rather than how it looks. Okay. So it's used by people who have like maybe self-image issues or they want to instead of being like super happy for their body all the time, you know, if they feel like they're not able to do that always, they can at least be accepting of their body and be grateful for what it can do. Okay, so it's kind of like a diet body positivity. Like it's more like a middle ground for body positivity, like a lesser version. Okay. And that was in the same topic as body positivity? Yeah. Okay. So that was a very diverse and interesting topic. We talked about weight with regards to that. We talked about race or gender, because body positivity encompasses a lot of those areas that you don't always expect. Someone brought up with the example of like more makeup shades for people of color. And I was like, oh yeah, that's great that we can have more options for different people or like normalizing disabled bodies and, you know, not looking upon them in shame. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we covered a lot of bases there. I'm trying to think, I guess what were the discussion questions for that? First one was like, is body positivity more helpful or more harmful? I think. Because some people have pointed out critiques saying it encourages obesity, which in my opinion is not backed by data. But I can't remember the other questions. Well, yeah, I think that gives me an idea of what that conversation looks like, because I haven't heard a ton of conversation about the body positivity thing, and the difficult part about that is there are some very loud voices who don't represent the majority of what is actually being said, because there definitely do exist people who are supporting obesity, but that might not be like, that might just be a loud voice, not a statistically prominent voice. You know what I mean? Any movement is going to have people that don't fit the the mold of
Yeah.
the exact movement. A movement is not a collective group of people that agree on everything.
Mm-hmm.
That just doesn't happen. So it gets complicated sometimes, and we have to define things at the start of discussions sometimes to get that consensus on what we're talking about.
Especially with something like this too, because I know in my view, because of just the spheres of conversation I've been around, body positivity is exclusively a weight conversation when it was just designed for people who like lost limbs, who are born with like genetic deformities. Like, I mean, that was the original, as far as I know, that was the original intention of it.
Okay.
Was for like a societal acceptance of people who have more like, more permanent, uncontrollable conditions. And then, but the only sphere I hear it talked about is in regards to weight, even if that's not the only conversation being had.
Right.
And so I think that,
and the weight aspect of it has been the like loudest part of the conversation.
Yeah.
But it was so good and refreshing to hear some other parts of it as well.
Yeah, because like in essence, you could take the body positivity movement and do terrible things with it. But I think just in general, it does good things. Like,
yeah,
because if you look at the philosophy of it, in essence, it's like feel good about yourself. You know what I mean? And so that would imply a set of complacency of like, you don't need to change anything. You know what I mean? So it encourages people to not grow or develop or change in any way. But I feel like that's just not the common interpretation of what is being said. Like when people are talking about body positivity.
Yeah, there's a lot of shifting definitions. Yeah, some of the more reactionary things are like, oh, this person was on a magazine cover, or oh, this what was it, Halle Berry in The Little Mermaid.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a big freak out over that. And
was that a race freak out, or is that like, okay.
Yeah, in that case.
Yeah. Because I was like, I don't think anybody.
No, not her weight.
Yeah, I was like, I don't think anybody's talking
people
about
are mad that a mixed race person was portraying The Little Mermaid, and that was a whole blown up issue on the internet.
That is bizarre, because I had heard, of course I had heard of that, but I had never collected that as a body positivity issue, which I think just like proves how skewed my view of what the conversation even is.
Yeah, and that conversation's a little different because it's also a representation issue in that case. People are like, oh, it's not accurate to the source material, and people will frame it in different ways.
Yeah, it's an interesting take. I thought the movie was bad, unrelated to.
I didn't see it myself.
It was all right. It was all right. The singing was good. It's just we haven't found a way to make underwater. We haven't found a way to make creatures, realistic looking creatures talking, look good. We've not found a way to do that yet. So like all the talking creatures just don't look good. We haven't found a way to do that. And
I see.
Lion King was bad because of it. This was bad because of it. And any movie that they tried to make talking animals happen will be bad because of it. So that's just one thing. What other topics have you guys?
Let's see. We covered private school vouchers for students in Iowa, the Students First Act. So somewhat recently, Kim Reynolds passed this. Well, she got people to pass this bill that essentially, if a kid wants to go to private school, they can do that and then get some money to do that from the state government.
Okay.
So we had a conversation about if that's appropriate to use state funds for a private institution. Does it make things more or less fair?
That's what a thought that had been told to me by my brother that I thought was interesting was that, and there's no validity to this, as in I didn't do any research on this, but it was a cool concept to think about, was that private school is supposed to be the majority of education and public school was only for those who couldn't afford private school. And so like the general consensus was that most people should be going through private school, Private schools should be the more common avenue. There should be more of them. And then public schools are for those who can't afford private schools, is the thought that had breached my mind. And so I think it would, I guess, be better, but it would kind of defeat the purpose if it wouldn't be private school if it was essentially state funded.
Right.
The students who go there.
It gets messy.
Like, would it even be private school?
As soon as state funds go into private schools, then like, does the state have the right to say this curriculum is okay? Is this not okay?
Yeah, I think that essentially defeats the purpose of, like, I get the idea of getting more kids into private school, and I agree with that concept, especially for those who are like complaining about public schools in whatever facet it is, whether it's underfunding or whatever political agenda, or maybe the football team isn't very good or whatever it is.
Oh,
like
no.
the worst possible opportunity. Like, for those people, like, they should have options to go to other schools, and especially in more serious places, not Iowa, where like schooling is a much bigger issue, like New York, where you have poverty-stricken schools, like, and they don't have any options. Like, that would be a bill maybe better for a different place. But
I disagree. I think the emphasis should be on making public schools better.
I think if the option is between the two, yes. But
You think both?
I think both. Yeah.
Okay.
I think well, again, I don't think state funding should be going to private funding in a place that doesn't need that, which I don't think Iowa needs that.
Yeah, and there's a few stipulations on where and where not the funding can go.
Yeah, like, I feel like it'd be
But-
more important to do that in a place like California, and a place like bigger populated, like Chicago, New York, bigger populated areas where choice is not as big of a freedom as it is here.
Yeah, one issue with the choice aspect is that a lot of private schools just raise their rates.
So that they
And
can
then
just
it just became the same
Oh.
situation
Oh,
we're already in.
So then why are we even talking about? That's so funny.
So basically, private schools are making more money now.
I guess that's the argument that most people have been made for any funding that goes to something that pays someone else. So like with minimum wage, people's argument is that like
Yeah,
they'll just raise prices.
if they
and
wanted to
nothing will
prevent
happen.
that, they should have had a partner law saying like, yeah, you can't just raise your rates.
just conveniently after we start paying you guys money. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
because then
every
we're just-
school on the
we're
face
just
of the
in
planet.
the same regressive system we're already in.
Yeah. Every school on the planet would be like, oh, more money. Excuse me. Oh, more money? Great. Let's go ahead and
Right.
use that. Like, whatever. So, I don't know. I don't know, especially in Iowa, that topic seems so foreign to me. Like, it's hard for me to even, I don't know any private schools in this area. Like,
Yeah,
maybe like a Des Moines school, I think, is private. I'm not sure. But like,
probably. I
like,
would guess.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know a ton of private schools in the area, so I think I'm like the least knowledgeable person to like give an opinion of public versus private. But I do think it's a much more talked about issue in like places where like school is a much more important issue.
Yeah,
I just don't think-
personally, I think tying schools to property tax is just the most regressive policy.
Walk me through what you mean by that.
So you got rich areas and you got poorer areas, and the rich areas can just contribute to their rich area schools, and then the poor area schools they don't have as much. And
Oh, yes. I see what you're saying. Like,
and then it's the cyclical effect because the rich areas go up in value because they have good schools. It's never ending loop.
yeah. And I think I understand, like, okay, let's start paying for those kids to be able to go to those richer schools or those more private schools. But
But you're still going to have kids at the not rich schools.
yeah, and that's
So
why
you
I
need
say
to make the not rich schools also good schools.
yeah, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're doing both, yes. If you're doing one, let's make the public schools better. But I guess like
If all the schools were like relatively the same level of education, then I'd be more in support of more, cross pollination, students going to different places and But
I'm trying to think what the common like dislikes against education funding are. Like I'm trying to think of what the side that disagrees with me is thinking and like what they're saying. So like if the problem is we need more funding for public schools, why haven't we gotten it yet? Like who's saying no and why? And I'm trying to remember what I've heard in this topic or what people have said because like of course the easy answer is we should give more money to schools. But I'm
I
wondering
feel
what
like
the rejection is.
I feel like if you ask most people in America if they want more education funding,
Everybody's going to say
everyone
yes.
would say yes.
It seems like a bipartisan.
Yeah, everyone believes in like educating our kids and they're the future, all that. But
Maybe
there's some sort of disconnect.
I'm thinking maybe the issue is, and this is so not backed by any idea, but philosophically, I could understand that like Republicans would be against it because they don't like what public institutes are teaching. So they're saying like, I don't
Yeah.
want kids going to my pro LGBTQ school, so I'm not going to support funding. Why do my tax dollars go to kids learning this? Is maybe what I'm thinking, but that just doesn't seem like a huge majority of thought for people quite yet. Like I don't think people are that serious about it to where they're like no funding to schools. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what the school thought
I mean,
is.
like
that'll-
percentage wise, the amount that's going to that very like little issue that's taught at the school,
like can't be enough to.
it's probably like microscopic.
Yeah. Well, I guess the news and makes that a much louder issue than it probably is at schools. But all it takes is one TikTok.
Oh, yeah.
To where every parent's sharing
It's
it.
kind of about the principles sometimes. Some people are just very principled. Like, I don't want a single penny going towards this thing.
Yeah, and so I think I can understand it conceptually, but that's kind of what my stance on most issues have been is that people are so adverse to giving the other side any leeway that they just say it's my way or no way, and there's no middle ground. And so this is like a prime example. We talked about that with climate change, I think last time, or mentioned that with climate change last time. There are other issues too where there's just no middle ground. Like
Yeah.
There's certain-
Ironically, I watched another Climate Town video recently.
okay.
And this one was about some of the pro oil books that are in schools currently. There's like Petro Pete and like it's straight up propaganda. It's so wild. It's a very interesting watch.
I should check that out.
So yeah, if you're concerned about bias in the schools, it definitely goes both ways.
Yeah, there are more issues. Yeah, there are more issues. And that doesn't distract from the issue, like the original issue of like people don't like what's being taught in school. Like that's justified, whatever. Like even if it's not, but it's justified that you have the issue of it.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
In the same regard, there should be other issues. But I don't like people pointing out like other issues in response to an issue being pointed out. You know what I mean? So,
Sure.
yeah. But in general, like that's
just this
super bad.
whataboutism.
Yeah. yeah.
Like who's done the worst crimes, the right or the left?
And it's like both, and we can start fixing this, please. Otherwise, there's nothing going on. But that's just kind of how it's peddled. What other conversations have you guys been talking about?
See, last week was another education topic, LGBTQ education in schools.
Oh, wonderful.
So like how should it be taught and how much and should there be different levels? Most people agree on the levels. Like
Yeah.
obviously kindergartners and seniors in high school need different.
I think I got this sex talk when I was like 5 years old. Like,
Really?
That's just how it is. I grew up in a stage where that happens.
That's quite early.
It is very early. And so I don't know if it's me, but I feel like every single fifth grader knows about this, unrelated to teachers. Like they know what a gay person is. Like they know
Right.
They know what like a transgender person is. You know what I mean? Like I feel like these people know what they are. That doesn't mean that it should be taught in schools though. You know what I mean? Like I think there are aspects of this that people are like writing on super hard that I feel like doesn't solve the question of it. Like there are aspects where people are like, well, it's inherently sexual, and it's like a lot of things are sexual. You know what I mean?
I
So
don't think it is sexual necessarily. Like there are gay people who are also asexual, for example.
well, it's weird because saying, I guess the people who say it's inherently sexual are taking the love out of it. You know what I mean? Which is, I guess, the whole purpose of
Hmm.
like loving another person are the people who are saying it's inherently sexual. But I think also when it's described, even by people in the LGBTQ member, it's not always described as that either. Um, and especially with people will point to examples that are not the majority of like very sexualized displays of um,
Oh, sure. Like
yeah, like
the school board meeting, like they're just going crazy and shouting, "We can't have this in our school." And
but I don't know. I think if you're gonna get down to what the actual issue is, it's like what does the state have the responsibility, or I guess what does the school have the responsibility to teach us, and what does it mean when they get taught that? And so a lot of the people are skipping over steps because the thing is it's like you can talk about it in a way that's acceptable to me, but you could also talk about it in a way that's not acceptable to me.
sure.
And so that variance makes it so hard to describe like what should be allowed to talk about in a school. And so I don't know.
hmm There's some issues where people just can't reach a consensus, and then we're like, "Oh, I guess we won't talk about it at all then."
Yeah.
And so
What
I
I
think that's kind of sad when that happens. Um, the government's almost a little too critical of what it does, or people are too critical of what the government does sometimes. Um, Sometimes the government can just do stuff and it might not be your favorite thing, but it's not gonna like ruin
yeah.
ruin the world.
Well, I think specifically with this issue, I think the best platform that the people who are anti talking about this in the school have is the lack of long-term research that is on this, and it's impossible for there to be long-term research. And that's okay with people who are adults. They're allowed to take that risk. But I think what people talk about is the risk that younger audiences aren't able to understand.
Yeah, I think that's fear mongering in a lot of cases. The idea that a kid could hear about like being transgender and then, be fully convinced and, go through some treatment and surgery is just plain fear mongering. Like there's a whole process to like gender affirming care. You need a doctor, I think, first, and then you got to get referred to a specialist, and they're going to have a lot of conversations before they even give you like hormones or whatever. And the surgeries under 18, like gender affirming surgeries, incredibly low.
I mean, what people would beg the question is, should it be low at all? Like people would argue that it should be zero.
Sure. And
Under 18, it should be zero.
I think, obviously they're children and they're not fully matured yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure about that myself.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I think it's weird.
should they get support and help?
That's what I'm wondering. Because the difficult question with like, if it's in education that you're talking about is what are the harms of doing it and what are the harms of not doing it? And so like, I think that's the more important question. And people would argue, what my thing is that the teacher's not going to be the deciding factor on whether or not a student becomes or gets surgery or does something life-changing for the rest of their life without knowing the full consequences. It's not the teacher that decides that. It's mostly the parents and it's mostly the other students, like the, societal thing.
Mhm.
And so I wonder, so if I were to solve that issue of students should not be making life-changing decisions before, 18 or 16 or whatever, if I were to solve that problem, I I think teachers help that and they don't reduce that. So like if you it's kind of a long-winded way of saying
Help what
like
and reduce what?
reduce the amount of students who are making decisions before they're 18, making life-changing decisions before they're 18. So having teachers talking about that would increase the rate of that happening, and having teachers not talk about that would reduce it. What you'd have to argue is that the benefits of having teachers talk about that outweigh the amount of students who are making these decisions. So that would be the conversation I think worth having, is like, what are the benefits and
Hmm.
what are the costs of teachers not talking about it?
Yeah, I think in my perspective, it's important to give students representation so they can see a gay person or a trans person, for example, and not feel totally alone, because it can be very alienating to just be different in some way, and you don't see yourself represented anywhere. And so even just like little depictions of gay or trans people in school media, I think that should be more normalized. Like I'm sure there's books that I don't know about that, but there's books depicting people of different religions, for example, which is not exactly the same thing. But people are depicted in different ways, and if you're a Muslim kid and you see a Muslim in your book, for example, that can be sort of encouraging, and you can feel less alone.
Yeah, and not to diminish the feeling of that, because that is a very important feeling. I do think though that there is a distinction between specifically like the lesbian, gay, and bi community versus the transgender community. I do think there is a distinction.
Yeah, we did talk about that on last Friday. That exact point was brought
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
The first three are becoming a lot more widely accepted, and
Like,
being trans is still socially in the Overton window.
yeah, yeah.
It's not quite there yet.
Well, yeah, because I think that like gay, lesbian, and bi people should be represented more for students who are experiencing those things. But I think with transgenderism, there comes a decision. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's more, that's where like more of that life altering decision happens. So I think that's the more common issue people are having with it, is like the feeling represented is a fantastic feeling and people should do that. But does that representation cause you to make a life altering decision before maybe you should be making that life altering decision? Is, I think, the conversation, like the more
I
important
don't think
conversation.
that does. I don't think representation will convince anyone to be trans necessarily. It might make them a little more comfortable too. And if it does, in my opinion, that's a good thing. They can wait on surgery until they're an adult, probably, but to change how they dress or present or their voice, they can get speech therapy or different things like that. I think, minors at a certain point are capable of decisions like that. And in the case they do decide to detransition, then that's okay. It's just up to them.
Yeah. And so I think what you inevitably end up running into is like basically just the cost benefit of allowing the teachers to talk about this stuff or stopping them from talking about this stuff. And so it's like, as a concerned parent, do they have more rights to say no to this, or do they have more rights to say yes to this? And it's kind of like a weighing option. And I feel like people aren't comfortable weighing the option because of how much of a person is associated with the decision. And so it's like, if you say no, you have this very large community of people, or if you're saying no, it can't be taught in schools, you have this very large community of people who are like, my whole personality isn't being taught, like who I am isn't being represented.
Sure.
And then you have but then you have a group of parents who are also like afraid of this or and talking about it,
Yes.
and they're like, I don't think people underage should be making decisions like this or even talking about making the decision. It should be more of an adult conversation. And so I think it is important to really weigh the options of like in our schools because it's a very different issue than socially should people do this? Should people talk about this? I think it's a very different question than should our teachers be teaching about this? And I think
Hmm.
people kind of muddle the two of like teachers teaching it versus um, should people be doing it?
Yeah, I think where I landed on Friday, this isn't fully solidified yet,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
there's some kids who are going to be sheltered from these sorts of things, from information about gay and trans people. And I think they have the right to know about those issues and know information about being gay or trans because it's possible that they are.
Hmm.
And so some students might try to deprive their children of that. And I don't know, I think you're infringing on the kids' right at some point to learn about these topics. Um, I think there's nothing stopping parents from like saying, okay, this is what you learned at school and this is why I disagree.
Hmm.
But I think exposing kids to different ideas and different people and perspectives is also important.
Yeah, and I think that's a big point that I always fall back on too. Like if your student comes in and talks to your parent, like the parent has equal right to just be like, well, that's stupid and here's why. You know what I mean? Like if a parent disagrees with it, like they can reprimand a teacher teaching the kid about it.
Yeah, it's not like the kid goes to school and then they're just in this like box and that's all they learn and are exposed to. I mean, parents should be pretty involved in the education of their children, ideally. And
Like they know if this stuff was happening like in
yeah,
general. And so I think where people get really scared is like these TikToks of teachers who are like, don't tell your parents about this. You know what I mean? Like and it's just such a small group of people who could be doing that or are doing that or whatnot. But
I'm not familiar with those TikToks. I'm not on TikTok.
yeah, I've seen like people who like I'm a gay teacher, like you know what I mean. And when a student comes
Mm.
up to me, I tell them not to tell their parents because they might just you know what I mean, stuff like that. That's like kind of a
Yeah,
breach of.
discrimination against LGBTQ teachers is definitely an issue. Um, yeah, even just mentioning, like I read a story once. I believe it's true. I mean, no way of verifying
Yeah.
the internet, but this woman mentioned her wife once in class, and then she got a complaint from a parent. Was saying like she was talking about something or the other, and um, to me, that's just a ridiculous double standard.
Mhm.
Like, if a man can talk about his wife,
Yeah.
and a woman can talk about her husband, then I mean, if it's just an incidental talking about your life, teacher asked, how was your weekend or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of the distinction that I make where it's like I don't see the issue with gay and lesbian like that seems purely like a religious conversation. But I do see the problem with specifically the decision making process of like the transgender conversation and stuff like that. And so like I haven't fully figured out how I feel about it because I feel like each school district is very different. Each place is different. Um, I see the worries. I do think it's a lot of fear mongering. Um, but I do struggle to see where the fear mongering benefits the people doing it. Like I struggle to understand that. So like in essence, like if truly all of like the rights criticism of the LGBTQ community is fear mongering, what do they stand to gain from that? You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like if there's no validity, what do they gain? Like what does the party gain from that? And that I don't
Well, they
understand.
get to rally people around very common issue. People get very passionate about it. So that's one thing they stand to gain.
Yeah, I think that would be like any issue though. You know what I mean? Like you could rally around any issue that I guess that's the whole point of.
But the whole point of fear is to get the people riled up. Like a few years ago, especially this, trans bathroom legislation.
Yeah.
That was a really spicy topic because everyone was like scared, like, oh, is this person going to be in my bathroom or is this person, can I go in this bathroom? And all this like fear. It was fear.
Yeah. And I understand the fear aspect of it, and I do think a large proportion of it is fear. What I do
Yeah,
try,
but I don't know. It's way overblown. There's nothing stopping anyone from going into any bathroom currently.
yeah, the bathroom thing is a ridiculous conversation. I don't think I've ever understood the bathroom thing.
Okay.
I understand it more in the context of like sports and other things where there's like a direct competition to be had.
Yeah,
but
that one's the
even-
sports conversation. We've had that one at our club before. With regards to trans people, that one is more nuanced, and you want to maintain a certain level of like athletic fairness and equality. So,
well, and that one's harder because
what worries me is when people lump that into other issues regarding trans people.
yeah, people use
like,
that as a stepping point.
Those are completely separate issues. Whether trans people should have rights in general and the sports rights, which are a tiny, minuscule.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the population doesn't have to worry about that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that doesn't take away the validity of the conversation, but it is a separate.
It's a separate conversation, though.
Yeah, but I think when I asked that question about like what does the right have to gain for that fear mongering, the reason why I asked that is because there is a huge monetary value to be gained from the left pushing this as well, though. Especially with like big pharma and just the medical industry in general. I'd heard this figure, and it could be wildly inaccurate, but I'd heard that you could make up to $1 million per person going through the full 9 yards of transitioning. And so, like, if I were a pharmaceutical company, it would be my bread and butter to try to spread that as much as possible because it'd make me a lot of money. And that doesn't necessarily affect the validity of it, but it does make me weary of.
Sure, I can see how there'd be an incentive there.
Yeah, like a good incentive. And that's where it gets into the conversation of schools, publicly funded schools. You know what I mean? Like there could be this big plot brewing. You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to get conspiracy theorist on it. What I am saying is conceptually, I understand how the right would fearmonger this situation, but I could also understand a huge financial incentive from the government, from big pharma, from lots of different groups and organizations to make this a big thing. And talking about it in schools would be a humongous win for that, if that were the case.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. That I've never considered before. The medical system lobbying.
I don't like thinking about it because it scares me. Because someone had also already told me that like there's never going to be a cure to cancer because it makes too much money to have people with cancer, which is just
I've heard that one too.
You know what I mean?
Cancer is not one disease though. That's a misconception.
Well, I guess like the whole most medical conditions are not going to find the best way to cure it because that would lose the money for.
In the current day, we've got tuberculosis, which is like pretty curable and treatable, but it's still the most deadly disease. And it has been for most of humankind.
Which is crazy.
And it's just because of bad profit motives.
Yeah. And so I don't say these things to like invalidate the movement because I understand that no matter what, these people are people. The motives that they're operating from are so ingrained into who they are that like I don't know why people are putting bad incentive onto like a trans person for being trans. Like I don't understand that. I don't understand a lot of like this making it an anger conversation that needs to be when no matter what everyone's generally fine. Um and all of these things as well. Like I understand the concerns on the right more than I understand the concerns on the left, but that doesn't invalidate anything about who these people are. I think is the general consensus that I come to.
Sure.
What other topics have you guys been talking about?
Those were the three so far this semester. We covered gun control last semester. That was a spicier one. We talked about hookup culture and the pros and cons of that.
Oh wow. Oh wow, yeah.
So yeah, we cover social topics as well as political topics.
What would you say was the most like heated one? What do you think brought the most like unrelated to like I guess how you felt about it, but just like the room, which one did you sense the most like disagreement? What would you say?
Gun control was pretty divided, I would say.
Okay, that's pretty shocking. Like I know the conversations, I understand the conversations about gun control, but I could see other issues being more heated than that one.
Sure. Yeah. That one got on a few tangents too, but
What was the
I,
do you think the
I
main
won't get into
disagreement
that.
for the gun control one was? Like what do you think brought that heat?
I don't know. I had a few personal things, I guess, just like little things that irked me, like
Mm-hmm.
oh, what was it? Oh, just this terminology of guns and how that's weaponized against gun control arguments, like
Like you don't even know what a fully automatic like that kind of
yeah, like AR stands for Armalite.
uh-huh.
Is an argument that particularly bothers me, and I let that show, unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
which I regret.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I don't think that justifies enough for the argument for sure.
Yeah, I mean they had more to say than that, but
Yeah, I think the gun control conversation is weird because it seems like the easiest. It seems like the one most associated with statistics. Like I feel like there are statistics that exist that objectively prove which side is right about gun control. I don't know them. I'm not even going to act like I do. But it feels like if you could just get a net negative versus net positive statistic on whether or not guns are good, you would effectively solve the issue. And I don't know, I guess I don't understand what the conversation is having right now with in regards to guns. And I know that it's weaponized really emotionally in regards to specifically like school shootings and horrific stuff like that.
right.
And I think that disproportionately weighs things. Not saying that it doesn't hold weight.
Yeah, a common argument is
Yeah.
like, oh, this is just like a tiny amount of shooting deaths.
Yeah, yeah. Like it holds weight, but it feels like there should be a statistic of the amount of lives saved by guns versus the amount of lives lost by guns. And I feel like there's a statistical argument
Yeah, the
that could be very
statistics,
powerful.
unfortunately, the statistics for saving lives are harder to gather.
Yes. And I've heard before, and again, I'm not citing any sources. I had heard before that the general argument is that there are more lives saved than taken by guns, is what I've heard. And that doesn't include like just having a gun and not using it. You know what I mean? Just showing somebody I have a gun right now. Like that saves a life because maybe I would have gotten killed if I didn't have the gun, even though no bullets were shot or anything like that. I've heard that it heavily outweighs the saving, not including that. Again, not a statistic that I am familiar with at all.
Wait, you heard the benefit outweighs?
I've heard that the benefit
Really?
vastly outweighs, and it doesn't include the amount of times that a gun wasn't used, it was just present, and saved lives. But again, I don't know what I would ask though is that like, and this should be how most conversations go, because people argue over statistics and they're like, well, my source says this and this source says this. And I think what you need to get down to fundamentally is like, if my statistic is right, would you agree with me? You know what I mean? And if people say yes, then you've gotten anywhere you need to. You know what I mean? Like, that's the end of the conversation, because like you just need to get down to fundamentally like, if my statistic is correct, would you agree with me? And that's it. And so like, I don't know, the conversation, I feel like people get.
Yeah, I've heard a different statistic actually.
Oh, really?
That
Yeah.
counters,
And that's exactly what I'm saying.
See, I've heard this. I've heard people say like, if you own a gun, you're more likely to be harmed. So it's just all kind of a wash. It feels like. I think it's a tactic used by the right to just. There's just so much information, and then people just don't know what to pick anymore.
Yeah, I think that's very true as well. Like, especially with the definitionally, like AR stands for, like you didn't even know what a fully automatic, you know what I mean? Like all that stuff, like does seem like
there's a lot of,
too.
Yeah.
I would say,
I think it is important for people writing laws about guns to know about guns and consult experts. I do think that's very important.
Yeah, I just don't think it holds much weight in like the argument for like a general person, Yeah. I would say specifically with like the your statistic thing, I do think in general guns take more lives than they save, but that includes like the overwhelming statistic of people using guns on themselves. And accidental guns on themselves is.
And I don't know why those are tossed out.
Yeah, and I don't know.
Still seem like an issue to me.
Yeah. I think most people's argument for that is that if someone were going to use a gun for that purpose, they'd use something else for that purpose. Which I
disagree.
I don't.
I think having a gun makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I think.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's the hard part, because you can't talk to somebody who has done that. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know if that.
Some people do survive, actually.
Well, yeah, I guess
it's rare.
Then that would be a good conversation to have with them of like, but that statistic that you can't prove. And I think that does say something about guns, but I think people would talk about a more medical issue of that, of like mental health. Like, that's where people would bring that to and say that it's not necessarily like, it may increase the odds of it, but it doesn't necessarily, vice versa. And there's a whole other arguments that I don't think add too much weight to the conversation, but people use anyway in that whole thing. But I think brass tacks, it just gets down to the statistics with that one specifically, I feel like.
Yeah, I need to gather better statistics on that issue.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't
know any. And
I don't have a good resource page that's like, these are the facts.
Yeah, and this is what's talked about. And I don't know. I think for me, anytime I'm like having a conversation like this with somebody, my main goal is literally just to like, let's emotionally bring this down to a normal conversation. Let's bring this down to not assuming the worst in each other. And then let's bring this down to a philosophical topic about what would be the best, as opposed to like trying to statistics bomb, especially like climate change is the best example of like every
many statistics.
Yeah, every person on the right is going to be like, my statistics back this up and your statistics are wrong. And every person on the left is going to be like, my statistics back this up and your statistics is wrong. It's like, why are we even talking about it anymore if like you're not going to listen to what the statistics are saying anyway? So
yeah, there are a lot of. I've seen many an example of someone trimming a graph.
Yeah,
there's a lot of trimmed graphs in the climate change debate.
Yeah,
I will say they're more on the right side that happens.
Yeah.
Which is a clearly dishonest tactic.
Yeah, I've never seen like a graph, or my biggest thing is like weighing the options, talking about it. And that's another incentive thing too, where like the incentives, I think, more on the right to produce more arguments against climate change. Like the financial incentive is definitely on the right on that one. more so. But
Yeah, and then people will point out like, oh, the renewable energy lobby is, this force to be reckoned with. And it's like, yeah, a little bit, but
yeah, I don't know.
oil and coal is a little bigger.
Yeah, maybe a tiny bit. Like there's really not a group more financially incentivized to say no renewable energy than like the oil and coal industries. So
Yeah, and there's whole documents. Climate Town went into this in the propaganda video, his most recent one, and
that's bizarre.
it's just these from like marketing firms essentially that were hired that just lay out the plan of like, okay, here's what we're gonna do to erode public trust in science and erode trust in climate change.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Well, and a lot of people, especially on the right, will say that the same thing's happening, like on the left in other areas too. And so, and that's why when I have these conversations with people, it's like we're not the main proponents of this conversation. You know what I mean? Like,
no, I mean, neither of us are climate experts.
Yeah, and beyond that, it's like you and me aren't writing, like you and me aren't incentivized to talk about these things in any way.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, if anything, like at the worst, you're talking about things that other people incentivized you to talk about, and you don't know that it's incentivized at the worst.
Yeah.
Like you're kind of like talking about something else, someone else's business. You know, like someone
you're doing free labor for someone else's ideas.
At the worst, you know what I mean? And so that's why when I have these conversations with people, it's like these people don't necessarily understand that what they're talking about, or the animosity that they're bringing isn't animosity of the person. It's animosity of an idea that someone put in their head. You know what I mean? At the worst.
Yeah.
And at the best, like we've thought it through and it's fantastic and we just disagree. You know what I mean? So it's like, really, these conversations don't need to be that bad. And I understand why they are, and I have empathy for why they are. But I'm gonna try my darndest to make, and that's why I have so much respect for your club of just like students of open discussion, and the fact that you're giving an opportunity for people to talk, even though you disagree with them, even though it's invoking like a reaction out of you. Like you're still giving them this room to have this conversation and like to rebuttal and to say these things. And that's why I really appreciate what you guys are doing, like, and what the club stands for and just everything. It's the equivalent of having this podcast. You know what I mean? It's really wonderful.
Yeah, it's so refreshing just to come in every week and have interesting conversations about things that matter, but, in a civil and respectful way.
Yeah, again, a ton of respect for you guys for doing that. And that's a hard thing for college students to do because we're kind of in a phase where we like think we know everything because we're learning so much. And
yeah,
it's difficult for.
Recently, I've been reaching the conclusion that I cannot figure out all the details about all these issues. Like, I perhaps shouldn't even try on some of the issues to get every point nailed down to everything.
Mm-hmm.
I just need to find the people who know what they're actually doing and support them.
Yeah. Wow.
Because ultimately that's what matters. Like, I'm not a politician. I'm not a law writer, whatever. So ultimately, I just need to support the people who I think are going to do the best job.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to be informed. But every single little detail, not necessarily.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's a good philosophy. And I think to do one step above that, the way that I do it is I apply it of like, which schools of thought are going to like help me the best and then help me help others the best is generally like, is this in line with what I want to do in my life? You know what I mean? And so like some people who I think people would have a criticism against you in saying that like, well, you're hurting tons of people by not like getting super into it and advocating for like this kind of like, if you're silent, you're the enemy idea of like, if
I
you're
do
not.
agree with that to some extent. I think if you do believe in something, you should be actively doing something for it. which I've been struggling with personally. I want to get more like involved in the things I care about.
Okay.
Um, ultimately, just like being complacent is, yeah, it's the same as being politically right. You're just advocating for the status quo.
Okay. Would you say that politically right is the status quo?
Yeah, yeah. Conservatism is
Oh wow.
about preserving what we have now, and progressivism is about changing things up and doing different things.
Yeah, and I think both can exist though. That like
It's a push pull constantly.
yeah, yeah, and it feels like we're in a poll right now, or I guess whatever. It feels like the change is the more predominant school of thought right now.
There's a lot changing, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that would be the most predominant school of thought. So I wouldn't say that somebody who isn't doing something is right. I feel like they could just be nothing, like neither. You know what I mean? Like I guess I wouldn't. I guess I understand it logically,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't consider them that. And that does come
It's
with
not the same, like, if we think about this analogy, like if you vote progressive, you're putting one vote in the progressive category. If you vote conservative, you're putting a vote in the conservative category. If you don't vote, then neither. So, yeah, being neutral and not voting isn't equivalent to being voting conservative, but it is supporting conservatism. I would argue.
I think I could understand that. But I do think though I dislike putting the moral objective on people. Like I like the stipulation that you said, like if you believe in it, you should support it. I think that's an important stipulation, but I don't like that when it's weaponized, and I feel like that could make people scared to not support, and it forces people to support when they wouldn't or shouldn't.
Hmm.
I feel like that's what I've heard people talking about, especially when it comes into like
Yeah, I think in those
silent
cases,
supports
you just need to be more informed.
in general. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever the issue you're trying to support or on the fence about supporting, ultimately just
What would you say about people who just aren't into politics very much?
I understand, first of all.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not fun sometimes, I'll be
Yeah.
honest. Being into politics is kind of a personal sacrifice in some ways. Sometimes you're advocating for yourself, so then it's less of a sacrifice. But
Mhm.
in the case of advocating for others, then there's a lot more to learn, for one. Because if you're not dealing with something, but you still want to support it, then that's a whole like
You need to do a whole research
process. Yeah. I think it's worth it, though. I think it's important to support those who need that support.
Yeah, I think it is important to get people just generally informed. Like to get people to generally. So I definitely agree. I do think the scary part though is if politics leaves you generally unhappier.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I draw the line, and I think it's much harder to say get into politics but don't let it affect you than it is to say it's okay to not be into politics. You know what I mean? I feel like it's easier to tell people that. Like I understand like information is the best, is what I purport for everybody to do. But I do wonder if like if it does promote general unhappiness unintendedly is what I would worry.
Sure.
But
yeah, that's an interesting. There's definitely times politics makes me less happy.
yeah, yeah,
Man, I did not like that one.
yeah. So it's kind of like a net positive, net negative. I've found that getting into politics has helped me a ton because it helps me understand people, and I'm a psychology major.
Yeah,
and I want to understand people. I want to understand.
It can
myself.
be fulfilling though, like fighting for some cause or.
That's very true. Very true.
So.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of stipulations on the general getting into politics, of like get into politics but don't hate the other side, or don't hate the people for being on the other side, or like get into politics but don't be a more unhappy person. You know what I mean? Like there are stipulations, but I think in general it is like a good thing to request people do.
Yeah, because ultimately politics is life.
Yeah. It's just whether you know it or not.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't affect you. I remember thinking in high school, like, man, politics doesn't affect me at all. Like, you know, if the president changed and I didn't notice anything, but now I look back and I'm like, wow, a lot of other people's lives changed based on, you know, different presidents and the laws they passed. So, you know, getting out of my bubble in college really helped me see that, you know, there's more people than just me
in the world
that politics affects, and there's quite a variety of experiences.
Yeah. Well, this is wonderful, by the way. I love having you on here. I love getting to talk about these things with people because I don't.
Yeah, this was a spicy one.
I would say I really enjoyed it, and that's what I liked. Though I didn't feel like we disagreed that much, but I also felt like you were incredibly respectful. As not that I wouldn't imagine you were, but it's just these kind of conversations that I think are important for people to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give a little background about myself. I grew up pretty, I'd say, like central conservative, and I've switched to like pretty far left over time, like somewhere in the socialism camp. So yeah, I definitely can empathize with people on the right still, and I can see where they're coming from. So I make sure to give everyone some grace.
Yeah, I'm definitely center right, but I also think I'm very skewed by other people. So like I've been watching a lot of Destiny recently.
Okay.
Like the blue-haired guy, whatever his name is, and he's like slowly making me more liberal. So I don't know, dude. I need to work these out in my school of thought.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with Destiny myself, but I know he's a debate guy.
I know he's very well articulated, and I don't know if he's only smart in context of debates. Like if he only convinces me in reference to a dumb person, or if I genuinely really agree with what he's saying. So I need to do some more work.
It's hard to know.
I need to do some more work on that.
Debates can be very, if you're open to the ideas, they can be good, but if you're not open to the ideas, there can be a lot of confirmation bias.
I know. I think what I'm discovering in myself, because my general political absorption has been, I only listen to two people having a conversation. Not necessarily that they're debating or that they're arguing or whatever.
Okay.
But in that, like, I would like there to be two different schools of thoughts talking. Because I don't want one person telling me everything and I just like all hair Ben Shapiro. You know what I mean? Like, or with any person. Anybody could fall victim to any one person who says things well. I want to hear like another thought while it's going. But I'm also discovering that I kind of associate the right idea with the more articulate, well-spoken person.
That does happen. That's why like Ben Shapiro does so well at college campuses.
Yeah.
College students like us can't fully articulate these very complex, nuanced ideas. And he's like trained to be able to pick people apart and just like dismantle whatever argument they have. And he talks very fast, which is scary.
Yeah. And so I'm discovering that about myself. So I'm as every college student should, I'm going through a political thing right now. So
yeah,
I'll let you know what happens.
It's a little inevitable.
Yeah.
Especially men in their 20s.
Yeah, I think I would struggle to become fully left-leaning because I've associated so much with success with the right. Just general, like the pursuing of success. Of taking responsibility with it. I'd have to really deconstruct a lot of the ideas and my views on what other people's success comes from to really get there. But I'm not going to put it out of the ballpark at all. So It's
Yeah,
all
the
about,
right does focus and emphasize personal responsibility a lot more.
Yeah, which is a huge thing about me, like of personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because of like the things that I've been through, the person that I could be, but the responsibility I've taken to not do that has definitely influenced like where I have on like being responsible for who I am and what I do and what happens to me. So, but I don't know if that's like an articulation of what other people told me the right is, or if that's actually, so, again, a lot of figuring it out.
Yeah, and another thing is in America, we have two right-wing parties as our major parties. So,
As in conservative and
Republicans or Democrats, they're both on the right wing in the political world. They're both capitalist at the end of the day.
Oh, I guess, yeah. I see what you're saying.
So most of the world looks at America and they're like, wow, they are right wing.
Yeah.
The U.S. is, I think, the rightest.
Wow.
Like the most right country. It's up there.
I had never considered it through that perspective before.
Yeah, but it's a very strong narrative that's pushed in the U.S. that we have the right and the left over here, but
yeah, I had never considered.
The left is a lot smaller in the U.S. than people think.
Yeah, the left's just really loud because of the internet, and a lot of people on the left who are loud aren't American. They're just like in other places. But that is very interesting. I mean, I had never considered the important discussion Republican or Democrat. It had always been the important discussion was left or right, but I had never thought about that in that perspective. So
yeah, it's one reason I don't like the two-party system.
Well, yeah, I don't think it's a representative I mean, most people would say I don't like the two-party system at the end of the day, even if they're a part of it. They'd be like, well, but still, I guess that's the
that's what we're talking about this Friday. So
what is it?
Two-party system.
Two-party system. I'm gonna go to one of them.
Okay.
I will. I have research that I'm doing on Fridays, but I have a feeling most people aren't going to be doing research or aren't going to sign up for research that takes place like 4:30 to 6 o'clock on a Friday. So
trying to figure out what makes people tick.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think people are wanting to do that on a Friday night. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, people like coming to the discussions on Fridays. It's a nice way to like end your week, and
I know, and it's early enough.
Yeah.
Nothing's
going on at 5. Like,
yeah, nobody's going to the bars at 5 o'clock.
No.
I guess
no social events start that early.
Yeah, I guess I hope not. We're running at an hour and a half. It's like one of the longest episodes we've done.
Really?
Wonderful. Do you have any last plugging that you want to do or any last messages you want to send before we wrap this one up?
We started with music. So yeah, check out my music. Justin Nock. It's just my name. You can find me. Second album coming eventually.
We're all waiting.
No promises on that one. Yeah, it's great to be here, represent my club, Students for Open Discussion. We meet Fridays, 5 to 6 in Marston, 2200. If you have any questions, you can email me at jrnock@iastate.edu. Yeah, it was great to be back. Yeah. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was wonderful having you on, Justin. All right, I'll see you.
See ya.